Today we're going to be doing the Code of Professional Conduct, the bylaws, and the rules regarding improper conduct. So that's everything that SACA and URBA have instructed auditors to comply with. We'll then look at the Auditing Profession Act, which again is for requirements for URBA if you are in the auditing profession, and then the auditor's responsibility relating to fraud in an audit. Guys, the only reason why that is addressed now is because the Auditing Profession Act and the CPC are addressing the conduct of auditors, complying ethically, and so it's important that the auditor understands at this point their responsibility to fraud in an audit, and then how they need to act according to the Auditing Profession Act if they do find it. Okay, so you'll see when we get there, I'm not going to do the standard in its entirety because we haven't started the audit process yet, and that's where this standard is going to fit in. But we will make the connection with the topics that we're addressing now and cover what is required at this point. So let's quickly go into the SACA knowledge level so you can see at what level you need to know each of the different sections in the codes and legislations, and then the standard. So we're in our week 3 for this schedule, and we're going to be doing CPC, APA, and the auditor's responsibility relating to fraud, and there you can see that's the standard, ISA 240. So if we come down into our knowledge levels, here we've got the Auditing Profession Act, and it says refer below to the details. We've got professional ethics. So here we are, week 3. SACA Code of Professional Conduct and Bylaws is a level 3, the entire code. The URBA rules regarding improper conduct and the Code of Professional Conduct, a level 3. So here we can see that CPC, bylaws, rules regarding professional conduct. We don't go into the detail of the codes in the SACA knowledge levels. They say everything in the codes is a level 3. Okay, if we come down to the auditor's responsibility relating to fraud, once again covered in week 3, it's a level 3, the entire standard. So we got to make sure that you understand the standard, although like I said earlier, you're going to find that without having addressed the rest of the planning and concluding, trying to just put this standard in to an audit process is going to be quite difficult. So we're going to just target the fraud elements in that standard. Okay, then in terms of the Auditing Profession Act, so once again, we're going to be addressing that in this week 3. There they break it down into your sections, and then a level 3 being the registrations of an individual and then of a firm. Level 3, practice and the duties in relation to an audit, reportable irregularities and our duties to report that, limitation of liability, and reportable and false statements, as well as the guide on reportable irregularities. Okay, so we'll only focus on those level 3s in terms of the Auditing Profession Act. So let's start with the Code of Professional Conduct. The Code of Professional Conduct. Guys, just for your reference, we saw in the SACA knowledge levels, there was a SACA Code of Professional Conduct, and then after the rules regarding improper conduct, they mentioned an URBA Code of Professional Conduct. For our references, we are going to focus on the SACA Code of Professional Conduct because the SACA Code addresses the professional conduct of any CASA. So that means a CASA who is an auditor and performs audits, as well as a CASA who is not an auditor and is therefore not in audit, but maybe is a financial director of a company or a lecturer or whatever job this person chooses that is not in audit. Whereas the URBA Code of Professional Conduct only focuses on the auditor and their requirements for conduct. So by default, the SACA addresses the auditor and the not auditor, which means because it covers more, we're going to focus on that. Important to note that when you look at the auditor requirements here in the SACA code and the auditor requirements here in the URBA code, they are the same. So that is why we say we'll focus just on the one that is more complete for our studies, but know that there is another one for just the auditors themselves. These are registered auditors. Okay. What does this code entail? Well, it details the ethical principles that a CASA should comply with. As soon as you choose to register with SACA as a CASA, there is a conduct level that you need to operate at. That level is not just determined by the South African CA body, SACA. That level has been based off the Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, which is that international code, the IESBA. And you will see reference to this code when we start the audit process in ISA 200 and in ISA 220, because these standards are the international standards for auditing and what needs to be considered when we decide we want to take on a client and be the auditors and how we go about conducting that audit. Okay, so when we see this code, we know that our SACA code has been based off this, and so we need to comply with everything we are aware of from our SACA code. Okay, because we're not going to study the Code of Ethics at CTA level. We're doing the SACA code. Okay, but the auditing standards, when we take on an audit, are based off this Code of Ethics, which our SACA code has been based off too. Okay, so it details the ethical principles that we need to comply with, and I've said here, it looks at two categories of jobs for CASAs, the SACA code. For chartered accountants that are in public practice, so these are your auditors. Public practice is in auditing. You are at an audit firm, you are taking on audit clients, you are auditors. Okay? And then chartered accountants who are in business. So you are out of public practice. You are the client. You are not the auditors. You are a lecturer like me. I am a CASA. I am not in auditing, although I'm teaching auditing. I am teaching as my role, but I'm registered with SACA because I have become a chartered accountant, and so I would be in business. So there are categories of jobs that the SACA code addresses for auditors and not auditors. And this code is now going to come and give you circumstances that you might face if you are in public practice and how the code says you should handle that circumstance so that you don't violate the ethical principles. And then they're going to give you common circumstances if you are in business. So you are out of public practice. What are the different situations you could be faced in that could affect your compliance with the ethical principles? This is how we suggest you address that so that you do comply with the ethical principles. Okay, so it's just a code of how they expect us to perform our roles in a professional manner, maintaining our ethical nature because we are auditors. So the structure of the code is this. They are going to first give some general principles that are applicable to all CASAs, whether you are in public practice or whether you are in business. Okay, you have to adhere to these general principles. And then it's going to give us common circumstances or situations that a CA in business could face, and then common situations that a CASA in public practice could face. And once again, it's just examples of situations they could find themselves in, because those situations have come up often, and so then they give us some ways to circumvent around those. However, guys, there's not always going to be a situation that you are faced with that is addressed in the CPC, because things happen all the time that are different to what we've ever experienced before. And if that's the case, you just need to apply the general principles that are applicable to all of us to find out what the threat is to the fundamental principle, and then be able to come up with a potential way to address that. And if you can't think of one, then that threat is too significant. Okay, so it's broken into 4 parts. Part 1, applicable to all chartered accountants. So if you are in public practice as an auditor, or if you are in business as a CASA financial director, you have to comply with everything in Part 1. And ultimately that means Part 1 is going to provide us with the fundamental principles and then the threats, at least the definition of those threats that you could face, so that, like I said, if you find yourself in a situation that hasn't been addressed here, you can apply the definitions of both of these to then determine what you need to consider. Part 2 is now only applicable to those that are in business. Okay, so this used to be addressed in Part 3, last CPC. It's now been pushed up to Part 2. Let's get in business out the way, because most of our CAs will be here. And then Part 3 and Part 4 will be applicable to those that are in public practice. Okay, so we have to look at and be aware of everything in 3, 4A and 4B if we are at an audit firm and we are going to be either performing an audit or any other assurance engagement, because we are at an audit firm. Okay, guys, your most important sections are going to be 1 through to 4A, because it's very unlikely in a situation you are going to be giving another assurance engagement to work with. You are doing auditing, so you should be the auditors of the client. But what is coming up more and more often, guys, is because we're doing board structures and because King has got requirements of your board having some financial literacy, especially those being part of the audit committee, in business is coming up a lot in your questions, because there will be a CASA on the board of the company. And then we've got to remember the situations he could be faced with, so that we can then go and see if there are any threats to the fundamental principles based on the actions that the board are taking, and as a result that this chartered accountant is entering into. Okay, I want to take you to the Code of Professional Conduct and just to the contents page quickly so that you can see this for yourselves. So guys, the first contents page you're going to get is the very summarized, where it just shows you that there are 4 different parts. Part 1, which is applicable to all CAs. So in public practice and then also in business. Part 2 is then only for in business. Part 3 is then only for in public practice. So now we are the auditors. Part 4, A and B, is then also applicable to the auditors. So in public practice, because these are the independence requirements.